Veterans News, a production of the United Veterans Organization of Nassau County. My name is Eric Spinner, and I'll be your host today. I want to thank Erica Bradley of North Shore TV for the use of her studio here in Lake Success, and Mike Peters for his technical support and for providing the training for our crew. This show is broadcast on public access television. I want to say hello to our viewers in both Nassau and Suffolk counties. I would like to thank Sabrina Lacey, a former commander and current chaplain of the Suffolk County VFW, for being my co-host today. Welcome, Sabrina.
Thank you, Eric.
I'd like to thank our crew. On camera 1, Bob Guarnieri. On camera 2, Mike Felix. On camera 3, Mike Ferraro. Assistant Director, Gene Schroyer. Graphics Director, Loretta DeBrino. Graphics Director, Beverly Allman. Assistant Producer and co-host, me. Producer, Ed Allman. And Director, Robert Lane, who never gets enough credit for the work he does. By the way, if any other members of the crew would like to host the show, find a guest and you can sit in this seat where I am. It's a great, great gig. Also, if you would like to ask a question or make any comment about the show, please go to moddiv1 at optimum.net. We look forward to hearing your comments and suggestions. Our guest today is Monsignor Charles Fink, a combat veteran of the Vietnam era. Welcome, Father.
Thank you.
We will talk to our guest in a few minutes, but first let us remember some of our veterans who passed recently. John Legnadier was a proud Air Force veteran who worked in federal law enforcement and was a volunteer policeman until he was in his late 90s in the city of Glen Cove. John Baptista Fiore, a guest of Veterans News in December 2021, was the commander of Nassau County VFW and Queens County commander of the American Legion. He was also a personal friend of many of us, and at his funeral, I did comment that I was glad that as county commander for Nassau Legion, I did not have to perform the service because I would not have been able to make it through it. John, you're dearly missed.
Yes, John.
Walter Hazlitt of Stony Brook was a Marine and was the chief of his fire district and a county legislator. Thomas Cardinale of Amityville was an Army sharpshooter who became a senior vice president of the Greenpoint Savings Bank. Thomas Campitello, also of Amityville, became chief of patrol of the Suffolk County Police Department. He served in the U.S. Army. Joseph Daly of Lindenhurst served aboard the USS Van Valkenburg and was a proud Korean War veteran. Michael Bartlett of Seaford was a retired Navy captain and retired Nassau County police detective. Charles Vassall of Port Washington was a graduate of Hofstra University, a Marine Corps veteran, and a career in banking. Richard Hoff worked for Suffolk County's Water Authority and was assigned to the USS Saratoga. If you know of a veteran who died recently and you would like their name mentioned here, please email us at moddiv1 at optimum.net. You'll see the email on screen periodically. You don't have to rush to write it down. That's the end of Veterans News. Now it's time for our guest. Well, as I said before, welcome, Monsignor Fink.
Thank you.
Now that we're here on Veterans News, I will get to know you a little bit better, and our viewers are going to get to know not only who you are now, but who was Charlie Fink as a youngster? How did you end up in the military? And some of your experiences in Vietnam, and also what caused you or what influenced you to become a priest. All of these are very interesting pieces of information which I am really looking to know. So Father, if you would begin, just let us know how you ended up getting into the Army.
Well, I was a student at St. John's University in Jamaica during the Vietnam era. I started college in 1964, and truthfully, all through college, kept thinking, well, maybe the war will end before I graduate, but it didn't. I graduated in 1968, June 1st, 1968, and I went down to the draft board in Valley Stream and asked about the possibility of getting a deferment for graduate school. And the lady behind the desk kind of laughed and said, not only can't we give you a deferment, but based on your birthday, it was the lottery. And anybody who was drawn from the lottery, whose birthday came out in the first 100, was going into the military. And I was number 60. So she said, you'll be gone within 6 months. So I said, well, if that's the case, I'd rather just, let's get it over with. So I joined up, and I was in the Army by the end of June, and spent 2 years in the military, including a year over in Vietnam in the infantry, where I ended up a sergeant squad leader.
What was your primary responsibility?
Well, it was infantry, so my primary response.
Bang, bang.
Yeah. We were out in the field. I spent just about the whole year out in the field. I had 1 month in the rear after I got wounded, 2 months in country, and I had a week in Sydney, Australia, my R&R, much later in my tour. But all the rest of the time was out in the field. I served in 2 different infantry companies, Delta Company prior to getting wounded, and when I went back to the field, I was in Echo Company, kind of a small specialty unit. But yeah, so.
Father, how old were you when you made the decision to let's go now, then wait till?
Well, I just finished college, so I guess I was about 21 years old. And the interesting thing is, I was actually a good bit older than most of the guys I served with. The average age of the fellows who served in Vietnam, in my time anyway, was 19.
Yes.
Many of the young guys were just out of high school. In fact, there was one fellow in my unit who was only about 17, terrific young guy, and he had to get his parents to sign off on his going into the military. But most of them were just out of high school. I was an exception.
Mm. Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned Draft Board 6 over on 5th Street in Valley Stream.
Yeah.
That was mine as well.
Yeah.
I think it was Helen A. Dahl was the officer over there. Yeah, I have a few stories about that as well for another time. So now you end up an infantryman in Vietnam, and of course we all know from all of our brothers and sisters who were there. I was fortunate enough not to be there. I was National Guard for that time, expecting at any point to get activated, and fortunately for me it did not happen. But you were taken from this wonderful place we called home, brought to a place in a steaming jungle where the average temperature during the daytime in the dry season was 135 degrees, where 6 months out of the year it rained, and it was like somebody threw a switch and all you had was endless rain in the monsoon season. How did you cope with all of that?
I don't really know. I joke with people that I don't even like camping. And I spent the better part of the year outdoors, sleeping in mud, all kinds of critters crawling over you at night. And I think part of it was honestly just I was part of an infantry unit, and I looked around and I said, well, if all of these guys can do this, I can do it too. I'm not going to be the guy who can't do it, you know. So you push yourself, and you do things that you wouldn't have preferred to do or even thought you could do. And it wasn't certainly not pleasant, but it was in many ways a very good experience in the sense that you really got to know a bunch of great guys, or many of them were great guys, and bond with them and learn from them. And it taught you that you can do more than you think you can do, and it told you a lot about what was inside you, for good and bad.
Yeah, well, I understand what you're saying, because after these many years, I still feel more comfortable in a military setting. It's just something about the predictability. You know what everybody is thinking, or you have a pretty good idea. We all kind of thought the same way, and we all relied upon each other, because we actually have the privilege of being part of the largest family in the world. I can't think of a family other than my own immediate family which I would rather be a member of.
We are very fortunate because we have our immediate family, and we have, now because of your father and Eric and some of the other people out there that served in Vietnam, you paved the way for the rest of us. Because when I served in Korea, my equipment that I had was a lot different than the equipment that that you had, Father, back in the 60s. However, you sit here today with another career, Father, and you're doing what you have to do, and you're still going on with the tenacity that you had to go through while you're running through the jungle, all right? We served in the military for maybe 2 to 3 years, but most of the time you're in Conus. You're not outside in the woods or anything. You're training inside the civilian world. That's why I think that a lot of the guys are having a hard time now, because the connection that I see with the Vietnam veteran comrades is unbelievable. The way I look at it in the comrades that I've come across, I cannot have the connection that you can have by serving, because there's some kind of, I'm going to say, camaraderie that you'll have that can be broken or told. Because the unknown told stories, the civilian people think that they know it. It hasn't been told yet. And as you'll come out now, you're starting to hear a lot more. But if it would come out a little bit more, those soldiers that are serving now, and the ones that's going to have to come out of college now, as you did, and go on board, they need to start preparing themselves. And they're not talking that long ago now. And that's what prepares you for doing anything besides the grace of the Lord, Father. And we commend you for sending the Spirit our way.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think those are all valid points. Being a member of the Vietnam generation, I think we have been the spearhead which has brought Veterans Affairs to the focus. Because of the Vietnam era veterans who were not welcomed, were assaulted and assailed by civilians who really did not understand what it meant to serve. We have made sure that no veteran will be left behind at this point. I think that's probably the best takeaway from our generation. I'm sure that you, Father, as a returning veteran, had those same experiences. And I know in one of the bios about you that I read, you indicate how you were, I don't want to use the word impressed, but the impression or the reaction you had to one of the ex-nuns who was broadcasting about Vietnam and demonizing all of the troops.
Yeah, well, she actually wasn't broadcasting. She spoke at the seminary where I was attending. In fact, I had just begun my first year, and I believe it was during my first year that she was invited to come and speak. The war was still going on. That would have been maybe 1971 or 72. It was still going on, and she came to speak, and she was, you know, one of many in that time who was a protester against the war and had a lot of questions about our involvement there. Fair enough. But a lot of what she said based on my experience, and I was the only one in the room of about maybe 130 people who had any personal experience of being there, what she was saying was contrary to my experience. She not only was protesting against the war and a lot of its policies, but she was pretty much bashing the soldiers too. And it was very disturbing to me. But as I say, I was surrounded by people who really had no first-hand experience. She was a respected person, and were pretty much swallowing everything that was being said. So it was very upsetting to me. So much so that, I mean, it crossed my mind briefly, I'm out of here. I'm done with this.
When the, Father, there's some people who do not know, broken people tend to help hurt other people, and broken people don't know what they're doing. So I apologize for her. I can do that because I'm quite aware that now she does not feel the same way.
Well, I'm not sure, and I understand what you're saying, but I don't know her background enough. She was a religious. She had not served there. She was just one of a large number of people. There were protests in the street, and I had friends who were against the war. I wrote a letter for a friend who was a conscientious objector, vouching for his character. I could respect that, but what I couldn't respect is defaming the soldiers who served. And so my response to that was in fact, I did stay in the seminary and I did complete my training and was ordained, but I wound up going up to my room and wanting to say something in tribute to the veterans. I wrote a poem that I'm very, pleased that over the years a lot of veterans have found that it put into words what they felt about their fellow veterans. And
the poem you wrote, "Bury Me with Soldiers."
Yes. Yeah.
What year did you write that poem?
Well, let's see. It must have been, I got home in 1970, 71, probably 1971.
Right.
Yeah.
This is the first time that I've saw this poem, and I'm honored to be sitting here with you and I read the poem. Like I told you, I read this poem probably about 20 times. Mm-hmm. When I read it, when Eric sent it to me through the email, but when I sat here and I read it in front of you, it pops out to me, all my experience that I have said, all those negative things that have occurred with me, it tells the main thing. And the main thing of "Bury Me with a Soldier." What is the message that you want to project to the soldiers out with this particular poem that we should gather?
Well, number one, it's a tribute to them. I want them to know how I personally feel about them. And it's my impression that many guys feel the same way about each other, especially combat veterans. And I've had the experience of seeing that that's true, not just with Vietnam veterans, but World War II veterans, all the way back to World War II. I've had people comment on how much they appreciated the poem and how much it's meant to them, and how they've shared it with lots of other people. So, number one, this is what I think of you guys, and then to the society at large. These men deserve your thanks. Men and women deserve your thanks, not your criticism. You don't know what they went through, and they did the best they could under terrible circumstances, and they deserve to be thanked.
I just want to read one thing that touched me in your poem. It says, "And though I am young, I am old enough to know someday I will die." When I joined the military in 1985 and I left the area where I was in Brooklyn. And I know there had to be something else. And when I decided to sign my name, and they said to me, that you're giving your life to the government and you will not come back or you will die. And I was willing to do that when I raised my hand. And that was the most important thing. You were young when you joined. 21 is still young. Mm-hmm. And the the soldiers that are going to be going over as we speak now are young.
Sure.
Right, you believe between 17 to 21 that's going to be going. And I'm going to cry because my grandson is 17 and 3 months. I don't want to say he's 18. He's 17 and 3 months, okay? And that popped out at me. Those families out there will be seeing their people departing. This poem signifies the transition that civilian man or women have to go through as they depart out of our United States of America. Which part of this poem, when you wrote this poem, signifies how you feel when you hear about those that don't come back?
Well, really the whole poem is about that, about the sacrifice they've made, and I think the end of it really sums it up. The last stanza, the theme of the poem is basically that, you know, someday I'll die and bury me with soldiers. The way the last poem the last stanza goes, bury me with soldiers, please, though much maligned they be. Bury me with soldiers, for I miss their company. We'll not soon see their like again. We've had our fill of war, but bury me with men like them till someone else does more. And that's the key. Nobody else does more. So these guys deserve our thanks. They deserve to be, you know, our tribute. And I think we too easily take it all for granted. We judge them, and we take it all for granted. We are the beneficiaries of all that they do, and it's easy to forget that. And if they weren't there, and if we don't produce men and women willing to do what they did and do, we won't enjoy all the freedoms and blessings and opportunities that we do.
Yeah, I'd like to, at this point, we know that nobody hates war more than the soldier. But yet the soldier is willing to go out and do what he has to do despite criticism, despite politics. The soldier bears the brunt of it all. And I think at this point it would be appropriate to have you read the poem in its entirety, because I think that probably draws it all into context so much better. And I've heard you say the poem before. I've heard you recite it at masses. Mm-hmm. It takes on so much more meaning. So I think that this is really the time to do it.
Be glad to. I've played a lot of roles in life. I've met a lot of men. I've done some things I'd like to think I wouldn't do again. And though I'm young, I'm old enough to know someday I'll die and think about what lies beyond, beside whom I would lie. Perhaps it doesn't matter much still. If I had my choice, I'd want a grave amongst soldiers when at last death quells my voice. I'm sick of the hypocrisy of lectures by the wise. I'll take the man with all his flaws who goes, though scared, and dies. The troops I knew were commonplace. They didn't want the war. They fought because their fathers and their fathers had before. They cursed and killed and wept. God knows they're easy to deride. But bury me with men like these. They faced the guns and died. It's funny when you think of it, the way we got along. We come from different worlds to live in one no one belongs. I didn't even like them all. I'm sure they'd all agree. Yet I would give my life for them. I know some did for me. So bury me with soldiers, please, though much maligned they be. Yes, bury me with soldiers, for I miss their company. We'll not soon see their like again. We've had our fill of war, but bury me with men like them till someone else does more.
That really, I have read this poem at several funerals, and I find it difficult to get through without choking up. It is so poignant, it is so meaningful, and the message is crystal clear. I am totally honored to be in this position today to be able to hear this and to be able to have you offer this. I watched the video report on Newsday.com, which shows you reciting it out at Long Island National Cemetery. And I happened to notice, because I like to look at details, you were in front of another stone which said Charles Fink Jr. Is that your dad?
That was my father. He was a World War II veteran. He served in armor and was North Africa, Sicily, France, Germany. I believe he was maybe second or third wave, even at Normandy.
Wow.
And would have, I think his unit would have been one of the units that served under General Patton.
Yes, I was going to say, it sounds like Patton's third.
Yeah. So, and he loved the military. I dare say he would have stayed in the military, except that my mom didn't want to do all the traveling. But he stayed in the National Guard. He was one of those 90-day wonders, you know, in World War II.
A shaved-tail lieutenant.
Yeah. And afterwards, he stayed in the National Guard and retired as a lieutenant colonel. And he died fairly young. He was only about 55 years old. But my dad's buried at Long Island National in Pine Lawn.
Yeah.
And I read the poem standing in front of his gravestone.
Yes, I recommend that to anybody who wants to look you up. Just out of curiosity, which National Guard unit, do you know?
You know, I should know this.
Or the location?
Well, it was he used to go into the Bronx, that Kingsbridge Armory.
Kingsbridge Armory, sure. That was the 258.
Okay.
I know the unit.
Yeah. He used to take me there when I was a kid.
Yeah.
And
I used to do training with them because I was in the 104th in Jamaica.
What type of father was he to you? Like, was he the normal fathers that you normally see, or was he just a militant type of a father? Because he said he was
very interesting, a very good man, a very hard-working man. He worked for the Nassau County Department of Public Works. He put in most of the sewers in Nassau County, and also was in the National Guard. But he was he could be very tough and stern, but on the other hand, a man ahead of his time. He could cook. And he did dishes, he changed diapers. And I remember when I was a kid, I was prone to a lot of earaches. And he would let me sleep on the sofa, and he would put his army cot next to the sofa and sleep next to me. And if I so much as whimpered, he would be awake just in an instant.
How did he take it when you went into the cemetery?
Seminary,
I'm sorry.
Yeah. Good. It was, he said, he and my mom both said, we're not surprised, you know. I was, but they weren't. So.
Yeah. Well, at this point, we're drawing to a close. Father, it's been a pleasure. I just want to mention that Monsignor is going to be one of my chaplains at the Fort Chaplain ceremony next Sunday in Rockville Center. Everybody is welcome to call me. I would like to get the camera crew up behind off camera and come on up behind me. Anybody else who's on the crew, come on in. We've got about 30 seconds, and we want to make sure everybody gets their due recognition.
And we want to thank everybody for what they have done to make this show a beautiful show.
Thank you all.
And thank you, Father.
Good to be with you.
Here we are all together.
Yes.
Thank you again.
Thank you.
We will talk at length.
Thank you, Father.
Thanks for being here.
And our blessings to those who are